of their lives and their discourses also. See that? So that goes with what Yahweh Shai said about how they like to be seen in that light. They like to be seen doing the right thing, or they like to appear to always to do the right thing, which they actually did. They did a good job at putting it off like they was doing the right thing, but when they went home and when they was in private or whatever, or in their hearts, they wasn't really conducting themselves according to the scriptures. But they taught it and they showed it off like, you know, they was this, that, and the third. Now it goes on to say this about the Sadducees. But the doctrine of the Sadducees is this, that souls die with the bodies, nor do they regard the observation of anything besides what the law enjoins them. For they think it an instant of virtue to dispute with those teachers of philosophy whom they frequent. But this doctrine is perceived but by a few, yet by those still of greatest dignity. All right, so the Sadducees, they sort of had the elite and the wealthy that followed them. Though they wasn't big in numbers, they had people that of great dignity, all right, that was in their group, but they didn't have like the strength in numbers though. But they had a lot of honorable men in their group. It says this, but they are able to do almost nothing of themselves, for when they become magistrates, as they are unwillingly and by force sometimes obliged to be, they addict themselves to the notions of the Pharisees, because the multitude would not otherwise bear them. See that? So they didn't have the strength in numbers, so sometimes they just had to go with whatever the Pharisees said in order to keep those seats, all right, in the magistrate's offices. It says this about the Essenes. The doctrine of the Essenes is this, that all things are best ascribed to God. They teach the immortality of souls and esteem that the rewards of righteousness are to be earnestly striven for. And when they send what they have dedicated to the Most High and to the temple, they do not offer sacrifices, because they have more pure lustrations of their own, on which account they are excluded from the common court of the temple, but offer sacrifices themselves. See that? That's why Yahweh Shai didn't speak on the Essenes, because he was going in and out of the temples and the synagogues, and the Essenes, they weren't there. All right. It goes on to say this. But offer their sacrifices themselves, yet is their course of life better than that of other men, and they entirely addict themselves to husbandry. It also deserves our admiration how much they exceed all other men that addict themselves to virtue, and this in righteousness, and indeed to such a degree that as it have never appeared among any other man, neither Greeks nor barbarians, no, not for a little time, so having endured a long while among them. See that? So Josephus thought well of the Essenes. It says this. This is demonstrated by that institution of theirs, which will not suffer anything to hinder them from having all things in common, so that a rich man enjoys no more of his own wealth than he who have nothing at all. There are about 4,000 men that live in this way. All right, they had about 4,000 members of the Essenes around the time of Josephus. It says this, and neither marry wives, nor are desirous to keep servants, as thinking the latter tempts men to be unjust, and the former gives the handle to domestic quarrels. But as they live by themselves, they minister one to another. They also appoint certain stewards to receive the incomes of their revenues and of the fruits of the ground, such as are good men and priests, who are to get their corn and their food ready for them. They none of them differ from other of the Essenes in their way of living, but do the most resemble those Dake, who are called Poliste, which means dwellers in cities. All right. I'm gonna read this little footnote down here about the Essenes real quick. It says this. It seems by what Josephus says here, this is a footnote written in by William Winston. It says this. It seems by what Josephus says here, and Philip himself elsewhere, that these Essenes did not used to go to the Jewish festivals at Jerusalem or to other sacrifices there, which may be one great occasion why they are never mentioned in the ordinary books of the New Testament. though in the apostolical constitutions they are mentioned as those that observe the customs of their forefathers, and that without any such ill character laid upon them as is there laid upon the other sects among the people. Alright, so that's the Essenes. Now it says this about the Zealots. But of the fourth sect of Jewish philosophy, Judas the Galilean was the author. These men agree in all other things with the Pharisaic notions, but they have more an inviolable attachment to liberty and say that the Most High is to be their only ruler and Lord. See that? Because the Zealots came up in order to oppose the Greeks and the Romans. All right. It goes on to say this. That's why they said only the Most High is their only ruler and Lord, because they didn't want to bow down or be subject unto the power of the Romans. It goes on to say this about them, the Zealots. They also do not value dying any kind of death, nor indeed do they heed the deaths of their relations and friends, nor can any such fear make them call any man Lord. And since this immovable resolution of theirs is well known to a great many, I shall speak no farther about that matter, nor am I afraid that anything I have said of them should be disbelieved, but rather fear that what I have said is beneath the resolution they show when they undergo pain. See that? So the Zealots, they was ride or die. And I'm going to read to you where one of the disciples was actually a Zealot. And I'm going to also read to you where the Apostle Paul was a former Pharisee. Now it goes on to say this. And it was in Gessius Floris's time. Gessius Floris was a procurator in Israel. All right, back at the turn of the BC to AD. A procurator was basically a Roman tax collector that was set over Israel, basically to collect taxes and do all the finances. So that was who Gessius Floris was, and it was this guy Gessius Floris who the Jews or the Israelites at that time they wanted to revolt against. All right, but you have to understand, if you revolted against one of the Roman procurators that they had set up, the Romans was going to take that as insurrection against them. So that's one of the reasons why the war popped off with us, because Gessius Floris was coming down on us with all kind of crazy taxes, and he was stealing money from the houses and robbing the Israelites. All right, that's what these white guys do. All right, he was a white man. He was set up to be a tax collector or whatever in Israel, and he was one of the reasons why we went to war with the Romans about 66 AD. But it goes on to say this about him. And it was in Gessius Floris's time that the nation began to grow mad with this dissempter who was our procurator and who occasioned the Jews to go wild with it by the abuse of his authority and to make them revolt from the Romans. Of these are the sects of Jewish philosophy. All right, so that's a little bit of insight on the three sects, and I'm going to read a little more on them. This is let me get that scripture showing you that one of the disciples was actually a Zealot, and then I'm gonna show you where Paul was actually a Pharisee before he went into the full doctrine of Yahushua the Christ. Before he became a believer on the Christ, before he had that vision. Here we go. This is Luke 6 and 15, naming the disciples. Matter of fact, I'm gonna read the whole thing so you can get the point. This is Luke 6 and 12. And it came to pass in those days that he went out into a mountain to pray and continued all night in the prayer of God. And when it was day, he called unto him his disciples, and of them he chose 12, whom he also named apostles. All right, because Yahushua had more than just 12 people following him when he was on the scene. Now it says this is their names: Simon, who was also surnamed Peter, Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon called Zealots.